in what ways has the toy collecting community been affected by the pandemic and people just having more focus on collecting toys from their childhood?
It exploded. If it was measurable, it was like the A-bomb for collecting. It was sort of a perfect storm of timing, because shortly before the pandemic, the Toys That Made Us was released. But the G.I. Joe episode, I don't know what that did, but I feel like people watched it that weren't collectors but had G.I. Joes when they were kids, and it like set a fire under their ass to go buy and like hunt down vintage G.I. Joes. Because from that point forward, it like you could not touch G.I. Joes for like any sort of reasonable price anymore.
If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment about the episode. And if you're watching on Spotify or listening on a traditional podcast platform, please follow, rate us 5 stars, and leave a review if you would be so kind. Thank you. Welcome to the Way to Know You podcast, Season 2, Episode 31. My name is Nick Rounds, and I will be your host. My next guest has been a professional toy seller for almost 30 years. From swap meets to garage sales to endlessly searching eBay for random grails to showing up to a shady house to buy an entire lot of toys, my guest's full-time job has been spent hunting down great deals on rare toys. When he's not busy co-hosting Toy Geeks, a live toy talk show, Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern with my former guest, Jake Gladfelter, he's analyzing random toy accessories and seeing if he remembers where the hell they come from. John from Toy Geeks. Wait, I know you. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Nick, for having me on.
I figured if I had... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have been to some really shady houses on toys. I have been in some sketchy situations at best. It is, sometimes you don't know what you're walking into ever.
Are we talking like hoarder levels houses, perhaps, or maybe even just like murder houses? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, murder. A little bit of. I was in a really bad Deliverance situation, and I shit you not, I swear I was in Deliverance. It was.
Do we want to start there? Do we want to just kick into the juicy bits?
Oh, sure. It's probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been going to a house. Because I mean, these are the days where, for forever, I had ads up on Craigslist. So like anytime anybody on Craigslist, it's like chances are it's going to be a shady situation. I mean, Craigslist breeds, shady people.
Yep.
So, it wasn't that long after I moved to North Carolina. So it was kind of like getting used to being in the South I grew up, less than an hour outside of Boston. So that's like kind of everything was like city.
Right.
So get to North Carolina and, set up shop, putting ads out everywhere so I can start finding toys. And so I got an email through a Craigslist ad one day, and the guy says he had G.I. Joes, a mix of like older and newer stuff, which newer to him was like the 25th anniversary. So 2009-ish era of G.I. Joe.
Gotcha.
And so I said, all right, well, I can come check out what you have. If you want to send me your address, time to meet, blah, blah, blah. So he sends me an address, and this is town. I'm fairly certain it was Clayton, North Carolina. And at that point where I had never really gone that far in North Carolina. So from my house, it was really only like an hour and 10, 20 minutes. It felt like a day driving there because once you there's so many parts of North Carolina where once you get off the highway, it might be nothing but like tobacco and cotton fields.
Wow.
And that's exactly what this was. And it's just, fields of it. I didn't know that it was tobacco at the time. I'd never seen tobacco growing. And it was like in the middle of nowhere. And I finally find this turn that I have to take. And then I get to like, it was like I could go left or right, and it's nothing but woods. So I just go left, and I know I'm looking for number 8. That's the house number that I'm looking for is number 8. So I turn left, and I pass one spot, and it was just like down in this valley. And like I looked down there, and it looked bad. Like it looked like a bad situation. I saw like a trailer from like a like a semi trailer, and I'm like, ooh, this is weird. So I passed that, and then there's like a little ranch double wide in front of me. So I just pull up and I park, and I go in and knock on the door, and I said, I'm looking for number 8, somebody named Ed. And this this woman who's probably like 120 years old answers the door, wearing like a house coat with an oxygen tank, but smoking a cigarette. And she goes, "Oh, that's Ed. You passed it." And I'm like, "Oh, you got to be fucking kidding me." and so it was that like spot that I had passed just 100 yards away. So I turn around and I go back. I pull down to that little area, and I get out of my truck, and there's like a high top bar table, like a patio one, sitting like just outside of this trailer. And like I said, it's like a semi trailer, no tractor there, just that trailer. And on the side of the trailer is cut out with a piece of plywood, and that's how they like get in and out of there on the side. And there's like a little staircase. But I got out of my truck, and on this little high top bar table, there's a radio playing something. It was mostly static, but it wasn't like plugged in with batteries, and not a soul around. And I'm like, if this starts playing dueling banjos, I'm getting the fuck out of here. So I'm just like waiting there. I call the guy, and he says, "Well, I had to run out. I had to just run uptown to run an errand. I'll be right there." So I wait like 20 minutes. He finally shows up, and he's like super crusty looking guy, has somebody with him. I don't want to make an assumption, but it definitely it wasn't like his wife or his daughter, or it was just a woman that he picked up uptown. And I'm assuming that the money that I'm going to give him for the toys, he's going to turn around and give to this girl. I'm like, I can't believe I'm feeding into this situation.
Well, I mean, just from the explanation of the trailer, I was expecting to hear you or have you smell some bubbling meth in the background or something. But yeah. It seems like a sketchy situation all around.
Yeah. So I looked at the stuff. I just gave him money. Like I just wanted to get out of there. Like I didn't want to leave empty handed, because it's like, all right, now I went through all this.
Right.
Even if I didn't really want this stuff, like, well, I'm just going to give him money. So I take it. I'll look at it when I get home. Chances are it's going to be worth at least what I gave him, at least being here. It's going to be worth it.
Right.
Thankfully it was. And when I got home and I told my wife about all this, she was like, "You got to get a gun permit. Like you got to start carrying when you go to these places, because I don't want to never hear from you again. Like when you go look at a toy collection, and then that's it. Like I'm on an episode of Disappeared."
Excuse me, I'm looking for Mr. Leatherface. Is that spelled? Am I saying that correctly?
No. That's exactly what it was like.
Well, especially if you're going to talk to the old woman out back, and it's like, "Oh, excuse me, I'm looking for the crazed serial killer that's cooking meth." I'll be right
see
there.
Him out there?
Yeah, exactly.
Chainsaw hanging off of his belt.
Leathery. Good times.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for indulging that. I will probably ask you about more crazy stories, but since you kind of start off on that one, then might as well just stick into it. But before we retread on past trauma and you almost dying, let's talk about happier memories, which is talking about, I started this with Jay initially about one is not simply turn to a toy geek overnight. You have to be made into a toy geek, and a lot of us, it's just from like our upbringing, just getting toys for holidays and stuff like that. So to that end, when did you realize that you were a toy geek? Was it just beyond getting toys for Christmas? Like, when did you actually realize it?
Definitely when I never like outgrew them. It was like going from like whatever the might have been deemed the appropriate age you're supposed to stop playing with toys, or
Right.
even just wanting them. Not necessarily playing with them, but just going down the toy aisle and picking something out. I don't know what the appropriate age would have ever been for the average kid.
I
But
think the assumption is usually like between 12 and 16-year-old. Like, I gave away my collection at 15 and I absolutely regretted it within 4 years time. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. When like I have some pretty strong memories of like I'm trying to remember the year, but I want to say it was around 1996. So I was 15 years old and like still going to buy Beast Wars, Transformers Beast Wars. And like from that point backwards, I don't have any memory of ever stopping. So like, it went from like Masters of the Universe was like the big childhood thing. Like that was like my main staple. And then from there to the New Adventures of He-Man in the late 80s, Ninja Turtles. And then, it was pretty much solid Ninja Turtles up to Toy Biz X-Men, and then anything really, a lot of Toy Biz, which led to a little like dabbling in Transformers. And then that led directly into Power of the Force 2 Star Wars. That led into Playmate Simpsons. And that was like 2002. And then like I stopped. I kind of took a break. I stopped buying toys, but I never stopped going and looking at them. Like if you're ever in a store, like I got to go look at the toy aisle. I have to go do. I have like it's an incomplete store visit if I don't go down the toy aisle, just because you want to stay current of what's out there. So like,
and even if it's like a crappy Rite Aid that has like 2 toys and maybe just like one Lego minifigure,
yeah,
you still got to go look.
It's like a Hot Wheel, and like something else. But for like that aspect, like buying toys for myself, it stopped for a couple of years because I was more so just focused on buying toys to sell. But I think when I realized like, all right, I am definitely a toy geek. Like going to the midnight episode 1 Star Wars sale.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And like having, like the news crews are there, and, they're showing that like it was being videotaped, like everybody that lined up at like 6 p.m. for the 12 p.m. reopening of the store. And like, I remember the news crew being there. I'm like, oh shit. Are people gonna like? Are my friends gonna see me here? No, they don't watch the news. They're not. I don't have to worry about that. But like, I think that was probably the moment when I realized like I am a toy geek. Like through and through, I'm a toy geek. Like this is happening. But I don't care. And from like that point on, like that was 1998. I graduated high school in 99. So like I guess like that was sort of almost I would say almost adult, like junior year of high school.
Yeah.
So I don't really have like a stopping point through my childhood and into my teens. But like at that point, like I never realized like, all right, I'm a toy geek. No, I did not grow it. Sorry.
Were there any toy lines specifically that you didn't get growing up, or that you couldn't that your parents could afford growing up, that you 100% chase after the second you got money and you were an adult with disposable income?
Um, Not really. I think, I mean, mostly because like, you know, with He-Man being like my main focus when I was a kid, that also like meant, when a relative asked, well, what can we get for Christmas or birthday? Like they were told He-Man. Like that's what I was into. I had one Transformer when I was a kid. I had a handful of GI Joes. Um, but like even like by the time I was, I think by the time I was 16, I had like recollected all my He-Man stuff like in better condition, and I
Wow.
hunted everything down. I had everything but the two giants. Like I had bought the laser figures from Europe, like even when I was like that young.
Damn.
I figured out there used to be a magazine called Toy Shop Magazine. It was like a newsprint, pre eBay, pre a lot of things, and you could find like it was just like a big wanted ad that was printed every 2 weeks. So I remember finding that magazine at Barnes and Noble and like seeing all these ads like from Canada and Germany. And I saw like there was this person that had submitted their like for sale stuff from Germany. They had to mail it to the States, and they would just like draw a list out. It wasn't like it was very yeah. It was very old fashioned how this whole thing was put together. So I remember writing a letter to the person and saying like, if this stuff is still available, I know it's probably been a month, but I want to buy the all of your He-Man stuff. So then I finally heard back and they said everything is still available. If we can do an international money order. And of course, like my mom was like, no, like absolutely not. And I'm like, yes, I'm definitely going to try this because like he had the laser power He-Man and laser light Skeletor, a bunch of the Meteorbs, a bunch of the later figures that I never had. So I ended up collecting everything that way. So like that was probably like my biggest point when like I started having a little money from selling toys to buy more stuff. But like I never had a point of like thinking like of any line that I really wanted. Like I said, I never collected Transformers. I'm not really into Transformers. I dabble in vintage GI Joe here and there, but there's never been really that much that I kind of like had the need for as an adult that I didn't have when I was a kid.
Sure.
And it might be because of dealing toys where like I get stuff constantly, and 99% of the time when I buy a collection, I'll always keep something for myself and I add to my personal collection that way. And so, like a lot of my personal stuff I have no money in, but it also kind of takes a lot of the magic out from hunting where, like once you start dealing in toys a lot of the like that special thing of finding something in the wild or like, even buying something on eBay that you've been saving your money for or whatever the case is,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I found that in a collection, it really does take a lot of the magic out of it. Big time.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that is like, did you still get inspired like for that rush for being a collector? But I guess that kind of answers the question. But I guess when was the last time that you felt that rush of like still feeling like a collector that was really chasing down that Grail stuff? Other than obviously than the great example of chasing down Laser Light, Skeletor, and He-Man, which for context, if anybody that's not a toy collector, those are extremely rare to find in the US. And then the other two giants is Titus and Megator, which were like basically impossible to find.
Yeah.
So
Actually this year, I wanted to start collecting Kenner Real Ghostbusters because I always had like an attraction to them because I loved the Ghostbusters when I was a kid. And my cousin had the Ghostbusters toys and we were really close. We played like every weekend. I would bring a bag of toys over at his house and he was pretty spoiled. He had everything from the Defiant to the Flag, to the Rambo Savage Strike headquarters. It was like, you name it, he had it, but he had no He-Man toys. So like it made it, you know, kind of equal where he brought stuff to my house that I didn't have, and then I would bring He-Man stuff there. So this year I started collecting Kenner's Real Ghostbusters toys, and it's been like I've been loving it because I pretty much told myself I'm not going to um like purposefully look for anything on eBay or look for anything specific. Like if I found a lot on eBay of parts, like I would pick that up. But I've been wanting mostly to like find everything in the wild. Like if I'm at a toy show, so like a buddy of mine that has a toy shop or like a collectible shop about an hour from me, he had gotten in a firehouse, and it needed a lot of work. Like it looked like it had been in the mud for a very long time. It needed a lot of love. But he had told me about it, and he gave me a good deal on it. He had the four original figures and a State Puff and an original Slimer. And of
So
course I had
basically
gotten
all the first wave. Yeah.
yeah, I had gotten the Walmart reissues already.
Nice.
But so that kind of like started me with the vintage stuff. And then like along the way, because I had picked, like I've been buying parts, like anytime I buy a lot of parts lots, whether it's He-Man, Transformers, or whatever. Anytime I got Ghostbusters stuff, I just put it in a bin. And like, all right, those are going to be mine. You know, so if I find an incomplete figure at a yard sale or whatever, like I might have the part for it. And I've never done that before, where like when I want to collect something, I've never put parts away. So like if I find something, maybe I can complete it for myself. And this is the very first year I've been doing that, probably since I was in my early teens and recollecting He-Man again. And I love it. Like, cause I kind of told myself, like, don't go on eBay, Facebook, whatever, and just start looking for things. Like, don't go in a Facebook group that might be Ghostbusters related and ask people like, do you have this? Or do you have this? Like,
Right.
I'm really excited to hunt the things down or not hunt it down, but just find it. Like if I'm at a toy show, I'll buy it at a toy show. If I'm at like a yard sale or whatever, or like, you know, if Jay has an extra one from Toy Geeks, if he has like an extra figure, you know, I get it from him. But it's been like a lot of fun where I have like space in my detolfs where I got the acrylic risers. So like every time I get a figure, I already have a spot for it. It's like this one is marked for the Screaming Heroes. This is the Screaming Hero shelf, and this is the Power Pack Hero shelf. So like I have voids, and it makes me so happy when I can put a figure in there that, you know, it's been waiting and that spot is waiting.
You're just steps away from becoming Bobby Moynihan in the Star Wars toy commercial where he's like slowly putting the toys on the glass, closing it very slowly, and just be like, awesome. So good. You touched on something that's very, very John specific, that anybody that knows you from Toy Geeks and knows specifically Stump John, is that you mentioned parts. So
Mhm.
I think the thing that's most interesting to me about the way that you specialize in toy collecting specifically is that in a lot of ways Jay's said this about you many times, is that like you're the master of parts. Like you can just buy, that's what the whole so for anybody that doesn't know, Stumptron is a segment in Toy Geeks where Jay will show pictures of random toy accessories to John with no context, and just John has to try to figure out like where does it actually come from, like what toy and everything like that. And more often than not, John can usually nail exactly where it comes from. Sometimes it's so fast that all of us are like, how did he know that? And there's other times where people will bring out the most obscure stuff in the world, and then John will get stumped. But more often than not, John is usually victorious. But I think it's like a really fascinating thing to watch, to just like how you can just rattle off. But then again, if you're so entrenched in the land of toys and seeing that stuff on the regular, like you just kind of internalize all that kind of stuff. But so can you dig into like when you kind of realize that part collecting is something that you should actually like a lot of people either focus on the whole of the toy or just the individual figure itself, but not necessarily the accessories. Like, when did you kind of realize that like you wanted to specialize in chasing after accessories, especially for like the completionists?
Probably it's probably only been about 10 years that I like have been trying to specialize in a lot of parts. Mostly because it really only until or up until a few years ago where parts for most toy lines became like very expensive. Whereas, like 10 years ago, Star Wars parts and Transformers parts ruled the price guides of the parts world, where like, you could part together a G1 Optimus Prime, like the fists, the hoses, the nozzle, the missiles. And then by the time you bought all the parts, you could have just bought one complete. Like you could have just bought that Optimus Prime 100% complete with all those parts. And vintage Transformers, vintage Star Wars toys was the same thing, where, like AT-AT chin guns, like original non-repro chin guns, which are like, they're made out of like this clear acrylic that typically turns yellow. Like those chin guns are anywhere from like $60 to $80 each for the vintage one. So a complete AT-AT might cost like $250 to $300. But if if you're missing the light bulb cover, if you're missing the hatch or the side door and the chin guns, by the time you complete it, you might be into it for like $450. And like, well, I should have just bought one complete. So since then, like over the past few years, like toys have just exploded. So like parts for everything is up. And I've been doing this for, so long, where like anytime I bought collections, I never threw like the stuff away that I didn't know what it went to, or the stuff that I maybe thought it was junk, or I just didn't know what it was. I would usually throw it in a bucket, because chances are over the next couple months, as I'm like cruising through eBay, I might see a listing that has a photo of something that says complete, and it might have that part that I recognize now. So that I can take that part, put it up on eBay by itself, and maybe I had 10 cents into that part, and now I can get like $20 for it. So that's kind of like how that all started, just identifying things. And it's become like this thing where, back before everybody had cell phones, you could remember phone numbers, like just rattle it off the top of your head, like without really even thinking about it.
Right.
And it's kind of come like that with toy parts, but it has like a stopping point where like post 2000, I'm terrible. I am so terrible unless it's like He-Man related. I know a lot of G.I. Joe stuff. I know a lot of Transformer stuff now. But like when somebody submits a picture for Stump John of like something from, if it was like Ben 10, or, like last week,
You'd have to phone a friend with Pixel Dan to see if it can help you out. Yeah.
Like maybe if you have kids, you might know what it is. But
Right.
there's been so much stuff that people have been throwing curveballs left and right. And then they know my Achilles heel, which is Dungeons and Dragons. That is like, even though that's 80s, I am so terrible at it. I can identify like 4 pieces from Dungeons and Dragons. But that's another line. Like ever since the NECA figures, the Lost Wave came out, like I'm going to start collecting some Dungeons and Dragons figures, which I bought some 2 weeks ago that I haven't shown yet in my hauls on the show. I think I bought 4 or 5 figures with accessories. So I'm excited to learn something new. But yeah, like I found dealing in parts, like if you do like a lot of parts, you can actually do really well. Like it's crazy how well you can do if you decide to just start selling parts. There's some other eBay sellers that specialize in parts as well. And like, I don't feel like I'm competing against them. Like they help because like if there's maybe like 5 eBay sellers that specialize in parts, like that's how we are gauging all the prices. Like, well, I saw him, he sold his via auction. It wasn't buy it now. He sold it for an auction for $20. So now I know that's essentially now that's the going rate.
Right.
So it's nice to have like other part sellers out there. And usually it's the prices are sort of like across the board. Like this is sort of what it is. And I'm always the way that I search eBay, I'm not going to say, but there is, like I bought 2 part slots earlier this afternoon for very, very little money.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna.
they're probably worth a couple $100 that I have like $10 into.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the biggest thing that's kind of impressive is just like the margins of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really smart. But yeah, because you had bought like a random lot recently. You were talking about on Toy Geeks where you bought a random lot, and then there was one thing. It was like wind jammers, like tuning fork or something like that you found in there.
Oh,
Something of that.
no, but that day, Windjammer's tuning fork, which I should have gotten, that was on Stump John that day. So that's a good memory. But no, I bought this bag of parts at the toy show that weekend, and it had 2 accessories from the LJN Tiger Sharks series,
That's what
which
it was.
those are just as rare as, like those are like finding laser light He-Man and laser power He-Man and laser light Skeletor. There are stupid rare. And I've never even in, my almost 30 years of buying and selling toys, I've sold 1 Tiger Sharks figure. Because they are unbelievably rare.
But the pandemic brought out a lot of weird collecting habits from people, obviously with Pokemon cards. You kind of alluded to it already, but I guess really specifically over like the past 4 years, like in what ways has the toy collecting community been affected by the pandemic and people just having more focus on collecting toys from their childhood?
It exploded in, it was like the big, if it was measurable, it was like the A bomb for collecting. It was sort of a perfect storm of timing, because shortly before the pandemic, the Toys That Made Us was released. And when the not so much a Star Wars episode, but the G.I. Joe episode, I don't know what that did, but I feel like people watched it that weren't collectors but had G.I. Joes when they were kids, and it like set a fire under their ass to go buy and like hunt down vintage G.I. Joes. Because from that point forward, it like you could not touch GI Joes for like any sort of reasonable price anymore. And then it happened. It was the same situation with He-Man, and I mean Transformers. Star Wars is that's a whole different animal. I don't know how that market goes up and down so much. But when the Toys That Made Us hit, that just changed the scenery like crazy. And then it didn't slow down, and then the pandemic hit, and it got worse because now, like, the guys that are, I won't just say guys, but anybody that was now sitting at home working from home, they have a lot of extra time. They're because now, like, that they are home, their 8-hour day they can get done in 6 hours, and they have 2 hours to go do whatever they want. And a lot of them got on eBay. And not only that, but a lot of them were like, now they're cleaning out their attic, like they're at home, so they're just doing stuff. They're finding their old toys in the attic. And this is like, I heard that more than anything is, well, I've been home so much, and I took all my old stuff out of the attic to decide what I want to do with it. I heard that from probably a dozen people that I either went and bought their stuff or they bought stuff from me, because now, like, they're reinvigorated to go and collect it. So that made it even worse when the quantity of stuff that was out there was lessened between, when the Toys That Made Us hit, I think in 2018, I think.
I can go look it up.
From that point to 2020, the quantity of toys that were available was dwindling. So now it was really hard to find stuff like at yard sales or garage sales or estate sales. Now all those people have started putting their stuff on eBay. They're not going to sell it in, for a nickel or a dime anymore. They're going to sell it online, do it themselves. All these people during the pandemic are buying stuff on eBay and collecting their old childhood back again. So it created this like huge bubble of new collectors. So the people who were existing collectors over all this time that were looking for those things, still hunting, are now paying, 2 and 3 times as much.
Right.
But, and they're like, well, why does the vintage Eternia, which was, it was like between $800 and $1,000, like 6 or 7 years ago. And now it's like $3,000, which, well, it's supply and demand. It's just like absolutely anything else we buy. When the supply is down, the demand goes up, but so does the price.
Yep.
And like I said, it was a perfect storm between the Toys That Made Us and, as it's only a little documentary on Netflix, but that changed the landscape big time. And then it was just from that roll into the pandemic, and the prices just absolutely skyrocketed. And it's funny because, a lot of people lost their jobs, didn't have, expendable cash, but the people that did have it were spending it.
Yeah, because you're chasing after your comfort food and the fact that you can't go anywhere for a vacation, so you have a whole bunch of expendable income. But yeah,
I had my most profitable year in 2021 ever in all my years of doing this, and that's crazy to me, absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah. So the Toys That Made Us first premiered in December 22nd, 2017, just right before 2018.
Okay.
The first 4 episodes was G.I. Joe, Star Wars, and Barbie, I think, and one other one. But yeah, and what's funny about that series is it was made by Brian Volk-Weiss, who started out making comedy shows, which I didn't realize until I started Googling him, and then I randomly rewatched Dane Cook's Tourgasm, and Brian Volk-Weiss is like there. Just like, I was like, that's really random. And my cat is scratching. That's something he shouldn't scratch. I'm not going to yell at him right now because I'm interviewing you anyway.
I just noticed that you have the Crimson Ghost Halloween buckets behind you.
I do. Yeah.
I got to get those.
Oh,
to get those
from Super 7. Yeah.
Yep.
You're the first person to actually notice that.
Really?
I've had Misfits fans on my show and they don't notice. Although people usually notice, it's kind of hard to see with a stupid glare, but they usually notice my my Batman and then the Jason Edmiston Joker and Riddler over here. But it's kind of hard to tell with the stupid sun that's in front of everything. But
first thing I saw was that the Fiend.
Nice. We are 138. So going back to you being a professional toy seller, what inspired you to officially kind of start your business? Because I know that you said you were part-time for a while, but like, did you ever like what actually like made you realize like I want to do this full-time as a job? And then also just out of curiosity, was there ever a motivation to like open a brick and mortar location, or are you always happy being the person on the hunt on the freelance game?
Well, it started full-time when me and my wife moved to North Carolina, because we got married in 2011, and we moved less than a week later. We had both been laid off. I was a driver for UPS, and I had I had driven UPS trucks in two fashions, for UPS and for a subcontractor of UPS for 6 years. So I got laid off. My wife got laid off, and we had visited North Carolina. My brother-in-law had lived here, and we just liked it so much. We gave ourselves a 5-year plan to be here from living in Massachusetts, and we did it in 3 years. So when we decided to move, we knew like the cost of living from Massachusetts to North Carolina was it was a fraction compared to Massachusetts.
Right.
So she pretty much said, if you want to try and make a go of it, full time, now is a good time to try it because, we don't need as much income. So it was like like an easy sort of a testing ground, sort of like an experiment, like how can I do this? How can I make it work? Can I make it work? And so, I mean, it was easy, it was just essentially same thing I do is hunt collections. I have an eBay store, upload whatever I buy. And as far as a brick and mortar store, that's like one of those things where probably once or twice a month, I say, oh shit, it would be so much easier to just have a store instead of like taking pictures of everything and shipping everything. But then on the other hand, so I have a couple friends that have stores. One of them has very trustworthy employees, like the best employees, like he can send them to a show or he can go to a show and he doesn't have to worry about leaving the store behind because, it's fully staffed. They can run it just as good as him. The employees can run it just as good as the owner. My other friend, not so much, where it's, like he feels he has to be there all the time because the employee is going to screw it up. They're going to sell something for the wrong price or they're just going to rip him off. Like, they're going to steal from him. So like, that's my biggest fear is like, if I open a store, it's not like I can close the doors to go pick up a collection. It's like, well, no, it's a store. I have to be open from the time it says that I'm open and closed on the door on the front, like I can't. And it's hard to find somebody that you can trust to, be there. And if somebody brings in a collection, and say I wasn't there and they said, well, somebody off the street comes in with like a big collection of GI Joe and says, what you give me for this? And the employee's like, whoa, I don't know.
$2.
Yeah. Can you come back when the owner's here? And they're like, no, I need the money like yesterday. I'll go to the other place. So
Right.
I think that's probably the hardest part of like a brick and mortar mom and pop shop kind of store. I would love it, but what I've been doing for this long is working, pretty seamlessly. My biggest problem is definitely storage, like the room that I'm in right now, like here it's okay, but there is literally fucking shit everywhere, like on the other side of the screen. I mean, the room I'm in is pretty big and it's still not big enough. And this isn't even it. Like I do have other storage and everything is so full where, if I had a store, it's like, no, everything could just go out, everything gets put out, but
Right.
This is what it is. And, the way it's, essentially now, like if somebody sends me an email in the morning, like, hey, I have a big collection. Can you come right now? Absolutely. I could be there in an hour. But you have a store. It's like, no, I got to go open my store. Can I meet you on Sunday? Like, well, no, I'm going to sell it by then. Okay. Well, you lose.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Are there any other parts of your day that are like really specific? Like it's like, because I know that you get up super early to look at eBay, but like without giving any trade secrets, can you talk about other things that kind of go into like what it takes to actually do this full time?
Oh yeah. If you want to do it full time, like you really need to be as like even more strict on your time than maybe if you did like go punch in on somebody's clock. Like if you worked a regular job, like, yeah, I get up at 3:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. I, I check eBay. Like I go to the gym. That's first. And I am like scrolling eBay, like as I'm on a machine or I'm doing something, because like the benefit of that is, 3:30 East Coast, it's still only 12:30 West Coast. So if somebody is like that works second or third shift on the West Coast and that's their free time, like if they're going to list something, well, I can kind of snipe it, if it's something worth buying. And then, after that, it's like from that point, like 6 a.m. to whatever time, like that's when I ship all my packages, because like to keep my power seller and what do they call it? It's power seller, and then this one other status. Like if you want to keep that on eBay, you have to have your packages out within 24 business hours. So if somebody buys something Monday, it can't be out any later than Tuesday morning. So that's like my most regimented part of the day, is to get the packages out. And when I'm done that, like I start listing, taking pictures, doing research on stuff that I need to get listed on eBay. And then from there till usually around 6 p.m., that's usually when I end. And then, watch TV for an hour, have dinner, bedtime, because 3:30 comes early.
No kidding. Yeah, I just the amount of discipline that you've explained in terms of like the stuff you do, like I remember like you were in the middle of like sorting a collection of like literally piecing together everything and like individually bagging stuff, and like
Mm-hmm.
the minutia of that kind of work. It's like just you talking about it and sharing about it on the show. It's like, wow, it really is a job. And like, I work in video games. I'm a video game designer, and
Mm-hmm.
likewise, like people kind of like ham-fisted like, oh, you get to play games all day, that's not real work, whatever. But it's like, do you realize how much effort is put into this kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And so hearing you put in that much effort to like actually sell toys just kind of blew me away. And again, it's just like a testament to you in terms of like how you view yourself, both you view your reputation both as a seller and as a person, of like, I want to make sure that you're happy with the end product, and that, if you buy from me, that you're buying a quality product. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. When I ship something out, I want it hopefully to get there as how I want to get it, like how I would want to receive something. Yeah. And it's the same way. Like my Monday through Friday is also pretty much Saturday as well, because even though like I'm not required to have my shipments out Saturday because it's not a business day, I always get everything done that's sold on Friday out on Saturday, because otherwise I'm doubled up on Monday morning, and that sucks.
yeah, there's nothing worse than going to the post office on a Monday with a ton of packages, because then you just hate your life, unless you live in Seattle. Unless you live in Seattle like I do, and you go to sketchy
Fuck
USPS
that.
too. Yeah,
I go to the post office like once a month. I have a daily pickup.
that's good. So obviously we started the episode off about your crazy story where you almost got murdered, but um, are there any other ridiculous deals or weird interactions that you've had? Have you ever found like a huge rail piece during one of those road trip moments? Like, is there any other crazy stories that you feel comfortable sharing?
Hmm. Um, that's probably my craziest one. Like I've had some where, I kind of looked at the people, like I looked at the seller or the owner of the toys, and I just don't know what to say to them sometimes. Like there was I bought a collection of GI Joe and He-Man figures from somebody also in North Carolina, shortly after I moved here, and he met me at an abandoned hot dog stand, and I shit you not.
Meet me by the empty wiener.
Mm-hmm. And he showed up, and he had two really big like cardboard grain barrels, like what Okay, so do you remember in our soap barrels? Remember in Shawshank Redemption when
Yeah.
he flips the lid off the soap and he throws it in the guy's face? It like one of those barrels, like a big thick cardboard barrel.
Yeah.
And he showed up with one filled with He-Man toys, and one filled with GI Joe figures. And I'm looking through all the GI Joe, and I look through all the He-Man, and I said, well, I'm interested in GI Joes, but I'll probably pass on the He-Man. And at this time, He-Man figures were like a couple dollars each resale. Like, if you spent 50 cents on a He-Man figure, you're doing pretty good. And I said, I'm interested in the GI Joes, but I'm not interested in the He-Man. And and he said, well, how much would you give me for the GI Joes? And I said, how about $50? And he said, would you give me $50 for the GI Joe and the He-Man? And I'm like, what? Like, and he was serious. Like, he was dead serious. I'm like, I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Buy one, get one free. Sure. We can do this. Yeah.
But like I've had some really good deals. I mean, going somewhere and always ask the person, like, do you have, how much do you want? And, really one time out of 10, they'll already have a price. It's not often people have a price in mind already. But I mean, just a year and a half ago, I went to a house not too far from where I live, maybe an hour. And the person that messaged me or called me was from Alaska. And he said his mom had taken all of his, they had originally lived in New Jersey. His mom now lives in North Carolina, and he lives in Alaska. And he's home for 2 days, or he's in North Carolina for 2 days, and his mom wants to get rid of the stuff. So I get there, and it's a ton of GI Joes, vintage Star Wars, and it's worth a lot of money. There's like Sears exclusive GI Joes, so much. And there's almost two of everything because she just bought him two of everything. There wasn't like a sibling, brothers sharing. It was just, he got two of everything. Okay. So we were, going through everything, figuring out what it's worth, or figuring out, what's there, unbroken, complete, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there's a ton of it. It's all over his garage floor. And I said, I would say, how much do you want? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And I said, and I just throw a number out there. I'll usually just like to try and get like a facial reaction from somebody.
Yeah.
And I said, how about $1,000 cash? And I was expecting them to be like, we were thinking five, So I said, how about $1,000 cash? and his mom, she was like, praise the Lord. Absolutely, like she was tickled at $1,000. So then she was, over the moon. And the son went in to get something, and the son's wife was there. And I said, how much did you how much were you expecting me to offer? And the guy's wife, she goes, well, he was expecting you to like make an offer so low that he was going to charge you for the tubs, like the tubs that it was put in.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, like, I mean, granted, the collection was worth like around $7,000.
Yeah, but margins,
man,
and also you drove out to them. You have to take the time to like resell and list everything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you have to have good margins if you're going to do a bulk sale like that.
Oh yeah. But I was like, that was pretty funny. Like thinking like, all right, if I said $100 and then you're going to say, all right, well, we need like $5 a piece for the the Tupperware totes that everything's been stored in.
It's like going to McDonald's, ordering something and making them charge you for the bags.
Right?
That's pretty funny. That's hilarious.
I've had so like been to so many deals and in houses and just buying things. I've driven like 4 or 5 hours and come home empty-handed because, they think it's worth way more than it is. I drove 6 hours one time, and the guy was buying stuff for his son, and then his son didn't want anymore, and the guy wanted to get it, like, sell it. And it was like piles of Transformers, and it was mostly like modern toys from like 2010 to 2015, and he had stuff that was like brand new. And I made this big pile of stuff, and like, this is what I'm interested in. Asked him how much he wanted, and he said, and I like shit my pants because I said this, it was for instance, it was like there was a Beast Wars or a Transformers Rhinox figure, but not Beast Wars. It was like one of the newer ones. And I said, I can get this on Entertainment Earth right now on clearance. Like, and you want, like $40. This is like a $5 figure. And he's like, well, we've been buying everything on Entertainment Earth. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And I said, I told you how long I was driving to get here. And he's like, well, it's not my problem if you don't want like my prices. And I'm like, nobody will like your prices, dude. This is like, I can literally go to Target and get half of this shit.
Commerce 101, sir.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to sell it, don't offer it. Yeah. You have to have some give there. There becomes a certain point where you are legitimately trying to get rid of it, and you need to agree to a price eventually.
Yeah.
So, good times. So in addition to being a professional haggler, you're also one half of Toy Geeks, which is under the umbrella of the Geek Dad Life brand. So you started the Toy Geeks podcast with Jay back in 2020, and then since then it's become a video podcast, but really a live toy talk show on Sunday nights. So more or less that it's been what you've been devoting your Sunday night to for basically this whole year and pretty much all of last year as well. How has your life changed in terms of just being around that schedule and also going deeper in the toy community and like really making major connections there? Like, do you think your toy addiction is better or worse now because of it?
I wouldn't say worse. I'm just going to say more involved. I mean, as far as my schedule's changed majorly on Mondays because if the show ends at 12:30, midnight 12:30, Monday is a really hard day. Monday is a very hard day to find any sort of motivation being on a couple hours of sleep. But I mean, I love doing the show. Like, I look forward to Toy Geeks. Like, when the show ends, like, I'm looking forward to the next one. Like, as soon as our After Dark show ends, like, I'm looking forward to next Sunday. And it's like that all week. Like, I'm so excited to talk toys, talk to Jay, and talk to essentially like this huge community that's been created. There's always been a toy community, but then the Geek Dad Life and Toy Geeks community it's like a family now where so many people know each other without ever meeting each other. And like, I love that, but it's also been, really nice. Like, now that I've met people like outside of the screen, like there's regulars that come to the show, like one of the North Carolina toy shows, that me and Jay will set up at, like people have come up to me and be like, hey, like, you're John, and me and Jay went to a toy show, like, just as, customers, up in Winston-Salem. It's closer to like Virginia than where I am right now. And, people were like recognizing us, like, do you want to, can we get your picture? I'm like, okay, like, it's kind of weird, but I still enjoy it. And also like meeting people other toy tubers or other streamers, and then meeting people in like the industry, like everyone from, like Nate Barch, who's been doing a bunch of art for He-Man and Four Horsemen, Mythic Legions, from him to like toy artists and indie toy makers. Ted Biaselli was on the show. Like that guy was awesome. And now we've like our friends, like he'll like send me a message like, hey, what's up? Like that's, to me, that is like, it's mind blowing. Like just, like I've never done like anything like that before where, working with Jay, his other podcasts, like the Lost podcast, like he's sort of like hung out with famous people for a few years. He has a lot of experience under his belt and like knowing how to navigate a lot of that and making connections. And for me, like sort of on Jay's coattails doing it, like I am so inexperienced. Like I don't know anything about doing streaming. Like he essentially sends me the link and just like this, like exactly like this.
So exactly like this that I absolutely asked Jay, hey, I like your setup. Can you tell me what it is? And then I absolutely stole it. But my difference is I don't do my show live. But yeah, Jay definitely like gave me the dry run of like, hey, here's what I do. So yeah,
he's such a pro. He is such a pro at all of it. It's awesome.
So in addition, you kind of alluded to this a little bit of just going to toy conventions, but you started NC Toy Con with Jay. Currently it's on a hiatus, but can you talk about like why it's important that a toy convention be a toy convention and not just be something that's lumped into something else like a general Comic-Con or like a sci-fi anime event? Like why is that so important? And of course, this is a rhetorical question from me.
I think most important because there's so few around. Growing up in the Northeast, like that's how I cut my teeth. Like that's essentially what got me into toys as a living, where I think I was 13 when I went to my first toy show, and it was a strictly toy show. It was at an Elks Hall or no, a Knights of Columbus Hall. So sort of like a small VFW banquet hall thing, maybe fit 50 tables, 40 tables at the most. And I went there with my cousin. We got dropped off. And I remember buying I bought a carded Thunder Punch He-Man and a carded Dragon Blaster Skeletor, mint unpunched cards,
Holy
$40 for the pair. I never forget that. But like walking around, like I saw guys there that were like importing toys from Japan, like a lot of robots and things like that. And then there was guys there that just were selling, like a table of their old toys. And when I say guys, like all these people that I was walking around were, probably, 30s, 40s, or, up from there, because there's a lot of guys that would sell like tin toys from the 40s who were like in their 60s and 70s. So it was a pretty eclectic mix for a toy show. But like I saw all this and I'm like, man, there's a lot of money in this. Like that guy has a table full of stuff over there that I saw half of that stuff at a yard sale last week for a nickel, and I can come and flip it for $500. So that show was quarterly. So I called the promoter and asked if I could get a table. And at that point, the tables were only $20 for an 8-foot table. So he took my name down and said, yeah, I'll get your table at the next show. So then at the very next show, I had accumulated stuff, and I'll never forget, my mom dropped me off. I got my table set up, and it was a Saturday, and the show went from 10 to 2. And I made $817. And being, 13 years old, making over $800 in just a few hours, like this is it. This is the deal right here. This is my jam. I felt like I was Oprah rich at that point.
I'm gonna get the large deluxe meal. Thank you. Extra fries.
You want that supersized? Yes, I do.
Yes, I would like the Batman hero meal. Thank you. What was it, like the hero sandwich or where the hell it was? Yeah.
Yeah, from Batman Forever.
Yeah.
And then you got that glass mug.
Which of course would break the second you ever put it anywhere near a sink or near your dishwasher. Yeah, of course. That's
So
hilarious.
yeah, yeah, I mean, regular, just straight up toy shows, they're they were normal for me from where I came from. Like they were prevalent. Coming down here, and there's so many other parts of the country where it is just like a mix where it's I would say it's mostly Comic Cons. Like it's a Comic Con or comic book show with a smattering of toy dealers. But 9 times out of 10, a lot of those toy dealers, it's like stuff that they order from like Diamond or Previews or Entertainment Earth, where it's like all that stuff is just new. Like it's not necessarily stuff you might go find at Walmart or Target because it's higher priced, but it might be like, statues from Sideshow or whatever. And it's like, well, that's still not what I'm looking for. Like, I really want like a strictly toy show where you can go in, you walk in and find vintage toys and just be with like-minded collectors. And again, like create your own community. And that's probably like the biggest thing with why I like strictly toy shows is that community. And no, meeting Jay that way, and then meeting like a plethora of other people that, it's I didn't meet until my 30s. And it's like now we're all friends, we're all buddies, like, grown men hawking toys,
As one does.
grown boys.
Yeah, I was gonna say the reason why it's a rhetorical question for me is because so growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, like finding a specific like store that was mostly toys, like most comic shops were mainly comics and they hardly ever had any toys like whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always chase after those. And like I think there's only like really one toy show in the Bay Area. And it happens in San Jose like once a year. And of course, that's exactly where like I found like the Matchbox Pee Wee's Playhouse like full set. The guy just wanted $100 for it, and that's when I got my Grail piece. So it's always at the toy specific shows that stuff kind of works out. But yeah,
It's sort of, I don't want to say North Carolina sucks for toy shows, but it still does. Like I talked to some friends that are still up in the Northeast, and they'll have a picture of a haul from a toy show, and it's nothing but like, I don't like vintage grails. Like they might have nothing but vintage grails, and it's like, oh well, I found a broken part of one, or like like where I'm from, like in the town that I live right now, like back in the 80s, there was no stores around. So there's no vintage toys around because, there wasn't a place to go and buy the stuff. There was no place to go. There was no Kmart, or I don't know what would have been around here, more like mom and pop general stores. But, it would have been like little trinkets and, countertop toys and things like that. So finding vintage toys in certain parts of the country is just nearly impossible because there wasn't a place to go buy the toys back when they were originally, available.
That's actually a really interesting point. So I live in Seattle now, and the wildest thing about living in Seattle is that, in addition to Microsoft, Nintendo of America is based out of Redmond over here in the Seattle area. And Seattle has some of the best retro gaming hunting ever. I'm going to interview one half of Pink Gorilla. They're a retro video game shop up here in Seattle, and like finding Famicom games is so easy because of them. Like I'd never seen a Famicom game in person until I moved to Seattle, and it is wild like how easy it is to get retro games up here because of stores like Pink Gorilla and other things in the area. But yeah, any of that kind of stuff, or just stores and peoples and communities that exist that are trying to like passively like have a history for this stuff, but also just like encourage collectors to be like, hey, you want this? I found it.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. So
that's how it was growing up, close to Hasbro. I was roughly an hour from Warwick, Rhode Island. So when I did start dealing toys, I would find cases of GI Joe toys, like sealed factory cases of so many things. Like I remember getting a box of Tan Grunt was a mail away figure. Not a mail away. He came with the Falcon glider, the foam. You just strap a figure to it and you
Right.
glide it like a paper airplane. And that Tan Grunt figure was bagged separately, and there used to be cases of those figures floating around the New England. Like I bought a case of 200 of those in sealed bags for like $40. And if I sold through that, just go get another one, because I knew the guy that had all of it. And there was a lady that worked for Hasbro that sold me cases of she had like cases of Cobra Bugs and the Phantom X-19 Stealth Fighter, because she used to get the stuff for Christmas presents, and she was getting them for pennies on the dollar because she was an employee. And she just stashed the stuff away in her closet, and then 15 years later she's like, oh, well, I got to find somebody to take this now, because to me it's meaningless. All the kids are grown. Who am I going to give it to? And yeah, being close to places like that, it's unbelievable how much stuff is still like sitting in warehouses or somebody's garage or somebody's closet. It's like, well, if you go up there and start looking around, it starts to get easy to find.
Yeah, that's a wild thing about employee perks like that. Like, I don't know if they still do it, but when I worked for Sony, like they gave you one copy of every single game that comes out on their platform, like to every employee. I don't know if they
Really?
do that anymore. Yeah. I won't talk about how I fed myself through GameStop doing that, but I never said that legally anyway. But that was a pretty awesome perk. So yeah, I can imagine it kind of goes with the territory, but yeah.
That's awesome.
So to get me away from legal trouble, I will say there's one last question I want to ask you, which is so the year's almost over. A lot of great announcements in terms of just like really cool toys that are coming out, and I'm sure that anybody that hasn't clicked off already that's still around is still hopefully cares about toys. So digging into that further, do you have any big toy predictions for next year, given the fact that we already had a lot of huge stuff? I know this is kind of biting off what you and Jay do towards the end of the year, but I'm asking you first.
Oh boy.
Is there anything you're expecting to happen next year in terms of like new IPs coming out that realistically might actually happen next year, and or any specific things that like haven't happened yet or haven't been announced yet that you think feasibly might happen next year?
Yeah, I think we'll finally see something from if anybody is looking or interested in a Brave Star reboot. I feel like that's one of those series that will be coming from Super 7 and the Ultimates collection. I think that's they're running out of properties to reboot, and like that's kind of the thing, because there's not a lot of ideas being thrown around. So we'll just take the old ones that worked back then that people are clamoring for. So yeah, I think Brave Star is ready for a reboot. And as far as other predictions for like something an existing IP, like now that Eternia playset's been at least announced for crowdfunding, they got to get to Snake Mountain. And I'm really hoping that we'll get a new Fright Zone, because the original playset, the original Fright Zone, the tree is always broken. The puppet is worthless because they're just dried up, balloons at this point.
Yeah, it would be really awesome if they could do like a combination of like the slime pit into the Fright Zone. It's just like one solid playset instead of parting it out.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that the slime pit was like a really awesome toy to begin with, but yeah. I never owned Fright Zone as a kid, so I definitely wanted that as well. And we haven't gotten Snake Mountain yet, so at least not in Origins. So hopefully that happens eventually.
Yeah, I didn't have the Fright Zone when I was a kid. I got one when I was, I think, 13, or, so still a kid, I guess. But,
Sure.
I
But not your,
wasn't 6 years old playing with the Fright Zone.
right. You might have had Grizzlor, but no Fright Zone. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, John. Now that we've bored everybody to tears about toys, which is exactly what I was hoping to do with this episode, because this is a purely indulgent episode, because obviously I'm a toy nerd just like you are. So this is 100% for me. But it was an absolute pleasure to interview you. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we take off? Social media sites, cool things happening in your life?
Yeah, definitely. Check out the Toy Geeks show every Sunday night at 9 Eastern on the Geek Dad Life channel on YouTube. And if you want to check out my eBay store, the easiest way is just go to smallplasticheroes.com, and that'll URL forward to my eBay store. Or, I mean, my new Instagram is also Small Plastic Heroes, that I'm still working on. And then my other Instagram, which isn't so toy focused, it's just, life, I guess, is halos.horns, if you want to find me on there.
Cool. Awesome. John, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time.